very much for that warm welcome. It's always so awkward listening to the things you've done. But speaking of, everyone's been so warm and so generous. And if I could, before we start, if there's so many people in this room, I'm sure that amongst us there are either current or former members of our armed forces or police officers. And if you are in this room, I salute you. I say thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. You are appreciated. I'd like to thank Premier Moe and the Sask Party for offering me this honor of a lifetime. It is not lost on me that when he floated the idea of having me here to his trusted advisors, somebody might have said to him, Mr. Premier, this is the guy who asks people, who are you wearing on red carpets? Are you sure that you want him here? But the Premier gets his way, and I thank him for that. And that's where I want to start today, the idea that we are more than what we do, and that at any point we have the power and the agency to change how the world sees us. The Premier's team asked me if there was a particular song that I wanted to be playing when I walked up on stage. I thought about it for a while, and I thought Wagon Wheel by Darius Rucker. I actually got very excited when the idea popped in my head for a few reasons. One, it's a great frickin' song. Two, I can sing the heck out of it at karaoke. And three, it's a prime example about what I want to talk about today, reinvention. There was a time where we all loved Hootie and the Blowfish. You know you did. And then one day we didn't. And the very next day after that, we all hated Hootie. It was a deep, visceral hatred reserved normally for the likes of Justin Trudeau and Ben Mulroney. And at that point, had you told the legion of Hootie-hating people that one day, a few short years later, they would be reintroduced to the front man as a country singer, you would have been laughed off this stage. But Darius Rucker reinvented himself. He wrote a new chapter, indeed an entire new book, and the rest is history. Reinvention is not only possible, it is necessary. My father was always proud of me. In fact, he's proud of all of his kids, and I think it's written, it's encoded in the DNA of every parent to see the untapped potential of each and every one of their children, and to believe that one day they will unlock it and manifest the fullest expression of who they are and who they want to be. But I would be lying if I said today isn't bittersweet, because were my father alive today, I know that he would get a kick out of the fact that I'm up here today. I spent about 20 years of my career in television, and you don't do that without having just a little bit of vanity, so you'll forgive me if I spend a couple of minutes talking about myself. I'm not going to list off my biography here, but I think I did my job pretty well, and some of the reasons I did it well for 20 years, but then for some reasons that were within my control and some that were beyond it, I needed to close the book on my television career and try something new. I tried life I tried a startup. I tried to help found a startup, and it was, for lack of a better expression, unmitigated disaster. But we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes, and I think that there's a lot that I took from that experience. And much like Michael Jordan, who valiantly tried to leave the hardwood for the baseball diamond, only to return to his first passion, and the thing that he was actually good at, I ended up back in media. And over the course of the past year, I've built a very successful political talk show on radio, a top 10 podcast, and I host the #1 current events television show in the country. However, if you listen to my detractors, I did all of it without a shred of talent and based entirely on my last name. And let me just say one thing to them. You may think I'm dumber than a bag of rocks, but that shade of stupidity pales in comparison to the theory that I would leverage the Mulroney name that they believe opened and keeps open every door to my benefit by going into Canadian media. Unless you're working for the CBC, it's a pauper's game. Yes, I'd placed a very big bet on a startup, and that bet did not pay off, and so I had to do the hard work of taking myself down to the studs and starting again. Starting over at 25 is one thing, but starting over at 45 with 3 kids and a mortgage in Toronto is a whole other beast. It's a heavier lift. And when you work in the public eye, changing how the public sees you can be as difficult as any part of that reinvention. And I'm not there yet, despite all of my jobs. Still not paying all my bills. Again, fun aspect of Canadian media. But it's satisfying. It's exciting. I feel like I'm doing what I was supposed to do. Saskatchewan has always held, and had always held, an important place in my father's heart. In 1989, upon the retirement of Jeanne Sauvé, my father had a very important decision to make. Who would he find to replace the woman who had so admirably fit in the position of Queen's representative in Canada? Dad decided to, quote, think outside the box, and had settled on one man, Ray Natition. Born and educated here in Saskatchewan, Ray served in the Canadian Air Cadets prior to being elected to the House of Commons in '74, serving under 2 prime ministers. As my dad told in his memoirs, quote, I was attracted to Ray because he was of Ukrainian descent, was a Westerner from Saskatoon, and combined a joyous attitude with a great personality and a sense of humor. While his French was fairly weak, I expected that his other great qualities would more than compensate for it. Now, Dad wanted to keep all of these conversations private and top secret, having only discussed the idea with Don Mazinkowski and no one else. He continued in his memoirs, quote, to ensure even further secrecy, I dismissed the staff so Ray and I could speak in total privacy. We chatted for about a half an hour as we sat outside the residence, overlooking the lake and the trees in their full colors before I made my move. Ray, I said, I've decided to recommend to Her Majesty that you become the next Governor General of Canada. As my dad said, he looked at me as if he were about to have a heart attack and then began to cry. I got up and went inside the house to get him a glass of water. And that's a significant thing right there, because Dad never got me a glass of water. Prime Minister, he said when I returned, now speaking as my father again, I apologize for my reaction, but as you spoke, I was thinking how astonished my late father would be to find out that I would be accepting the position of Governor General. My dad replied, Ray, not as astonished as my father would have been to know I was offering it. After stressing the need for utmost secrecy, Ray had a question. Can I talk to Gerda about it? Of course you can talk to your wife about it, but no one else. And as my father walked him to his car and they shook hands, Ray got into the car and rolled down the window. Prime Minister, will you do me one final favor? Sure, Ray. What do you have in mind? If anything happens to me on the way back to Ottawa, would you leak this one to the media? And the rest, as they say, was history. The Right Honourable Ray Natition, as well as Her Excellency Gerda Natition, acquitted themselves with grace and class, opening up the grounds of Rideau Hall to ordinary Canadians and tourists alike, and was praised for raising the status and the stature of Ukrainian Canadians and indeed all of Saskatchewan. He established the Governor General's Performing Arts Awards, as well as highlighting the contributions made by members of Canada's multicultural society communities. And not for nothing, he worked hard on his French language skills throughout his term in office. But when asked about the quality of that French, my dad quoted Cyrano de Bergerac, who battled valiantly for the love and the heart of his unrequited love, Roxane, hoping that she could see past his giant nose and fall in love with his heart. And upon realizing that that was not going to happen, Cyrano said, C'est bien plus beau lorsque c'est inutile. It's so much more beautiful when you know you're not going to get there. The story of Alfred Nobel has been banging around in my head for years, and I've wondered what to do with that story, and I thought I would share it today. Almost everybody knows that he's the founder of the Nobel Prize, specifically the one that we talk about the most, the Nobel Peace Prize, but fewer know him as the inventor of dynamite. Nitroglycerin was an explosive which, for the longest time, was so unstable it had very little practical application. And Alfred Nobel changed that by combining stabilizing elements with nitroglycerin that allowed for a commercially viable explosive. And boy, was it commercially viable. Transforming the face of construction and of mining, dynamite ushered in a new era of natural resource extraction as well as massive public works. Explosive capability. The explosive capability of dynamite allowed man to, for the very first time, bend the natural world to his will. Excavation, tunneling, hydroelectrical projects, the flattening of mountains, the redirection of rivers, all made possible through the invention of Alfred Nobel. But with so many commercial products before it and since, it didn't take long for Nobel's invention to be adapted for military application. And as the story goes, later on in his life, upon the death of his brother, Alfred opened up a French newspaper that had accidentally printed his obituary, which stated, "Le marchand de la mort est mort," or for the rhetoricians in the room, "the merchant of death is dead." It continued, and he read, "Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday." Legend has it that he was aghast that his life's work had been reduced to a characterization that he challenged. And rather than write a letter to the editor, he took it upon himself to reinvent the rest of his life. He decided to donate the majority of his wealth to found the Nobel Prize, to be awarded annually without distinction of nationality, granted in accordance with the principle of, quote, "for the greatest benefit to humankind." And so I present to you the following thought exercise. If some over-enthusiastic journalist were to accidentally print the obituary of Canada today, how would it read? I'll give it a crack. Today, the world marked the passing of Canada, younger than most, older than some. Canada, on her best days, was a beacon in the world for freedom, justice, inclusion. Canada gave the world the telephone. We made Yahtzee, the light bulb, and hockey. And yes, some of you may notice that I just quoted the rapper Classified from his song, "O Canada." We gave the world the pacemaker, insulin. We're the first nation to successfully complete a double lung transplant. For the better part of her history, Canada was a trusted ally, a safe harbor for those fleeing persecution, a voice for the voiceless, and an example for other nations. People from around the world flocked to her shores to bring the best of where they came from together with others to contribute to building a nation that was unlike any in the world. But the last few years of her life did seem to be defined by a nearly psychopathic desire to get in her own way. Anointed by God with a natural bounty that, if mined and managed responsibly, could have made her the fairest and wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And yet that natural bounty mostly remained locked away. Canadians had built one of the fairest and most equal societies on the planet, and yet they seemed hell-bent on focusing on the minutiae and sometimes the mirages that made them different. The 21st century was poised to be the Canadian century, but through much fault of their own, Canadians squandered that opportunity. And today, we bid farewell to a nation that had greatness within its grasp, but decided instead to become smaller, to become lesser, to marginalize itself, and by extension made the world a less wonderful place. Canada, for many on the outside looking in, gone far too soon. Ironically, though, the assessment of the Canadian legacy by so many who, through the happy accident of birthright or another privileged pathway to citizenship, is markedly different. She overstayed her welcome. So let's continue with the thought exercise and pull an Alfred Nobel. Canada reads that. Canada is shocked. What does Canada do? Again, I'll take a crack at it. We must reconnect to the feelings we had 6 months ago. Team Canada all the way. Premiers making unilateral decisions that have a direct and negative impact on our ability as a nation to build up our infrastructure, our economy, and indeed our society need to get with the program. If British Columbia owns its west coast, then Saskatchewan owns its potash, uranium, and the fields that feed us all. Alberta owns its oil and gas. Ontario, I guess they own me. Everyone keeps their toys and everybody loses. The federal government recognizes that all things being equal, the economy suffers when government views itself as indispensable to the entrepreneurial class and views itself as indispensable to be part of the solution to every problem, including the problems of their own making. Ottawa unleashes the potential of the private sector, cutting red tape, reducing the duplication of federal and provincial environmental oversight, and the projects of national importance truly start getting built. Built with Canadian know-how, Canadian workers using Canadian technology, Canadian steel, uranium, aluminum, lumber, critical minerals, and a portion of the revenue of every single one of these projects is put directly into a technology accelerator fund designed to turn Canada into an environmental sciences superpower. The technologies developed in Canada at home, and by the way, they are myriad and they are world-changing. The technologies developed at home will be exported to the financial benefit of this country and to the environmental benefit of the entire globe. This is the definition of a middle power punching above its class. And we are no longer trying to tax Canadians into behavior that is deemed acceptable, but rather incentivizing behavior and solving problems with world-class technology developed right here at home and licensed around the world. All of these titanic companies headquartered in this country, paying taxes at every level of government to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars a year, are the catalyst to building the single most robust social safety net of any advanced Western democracy. No child goes hungry, no hospital underfunded, no road unpaved. Aboriginal Canadians richer than any Native community anywhere on the planet, their rights respected, their dreams realized. And as for the disaster that has been the past 10 years of nationally corrosive and socially irresponsible immigration policy, everyone that is lucky enough to come to this country must pass a citizenship course that recognizes the contributions of both First Nations and founding cultures. They must learn the broad strokes of the history of this country, the good, the bad, the comforting, and the inconvenient. As well, they must demonstrate an aptitude of at least one of our official languages before they get here. And everybody who has come here over the past 10 years must in some way, and sometimes retroactively, participate in some form of a national service program to integrate new Canadians in what is and will always be one of the greatest countries in the history of the world. And one last suggestion, and I came up with this one only recently. Every single federal and provincial courtroom must have engraved on its wall, directly in the line of sight of every single Canadian judge, the words, "Lest we forget." To remind them that Canada's military history did not begin with UN blue helmets. It is one stained and soaked in the blood of young men and women from this land who gave their lives for our valued democracy and for human rights. It is a reminder that the poppy is not and never has been a political statement. It is simply a statement of respect to those who were prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice so that we could be here today. And if that simple concept is a bridge too far for any judge, there's the door. Reimagining this country is not only possible, it is essential. And I choose to be optimistic that our Prime Minister believes that as well. Many partisans say that this Liberal government is just like the old. I choose to look at things a bit differently. Same party, different management, and the manager recognizes the lost opportunities and the squandered chances to grow the economy and to build this nation into what it can be. The pace of change may indeed be too slow for some of the more conservative among us, but we have and will continue to be a country built on consensus and compromise. And I would rather a government that I did not vote for that gets a lot of things right slowly than a government that I didn't vote for that gets none of it right at lightning speed. Now, I can't stand here and tell you anything that you don't already know about the vital role that this province plays in the global food supply chain and keeping Canadians fed. 44% of all the arable acres in this entire country are right here in Saskatchewan. And if you've ever listened to my radio show, then you know that I hold the entrepreneurial class in the utmost respect. But there is no group of people that embody the best of the entrepreneurial spirit more than farmers, betting on themselves, becoming experts in their field, creating bonds that tie communities together, perfecting their craft. Farmers are also the ultimate early adopters of technology. Now, who cares if you're the first person on your block to get the new Tesla or that new wearable piece of technology? Early adopters in farming do so to the benefit of us all, using cutting-edge science and technology to optimize every single acre of farmland, to raise crop yields and improve the quality of ingredients in everything that we eat. I promise you, if I hold entrepreneurs in the highest regard, then at the top of that pedestal is where I place Canadian farmers. Saskatchewan is in the enviable position of being at the nexus of two global issues, food and energy security. And in the words of a great premier, Mr. Brad Wall, we must press that advantage. Just as I do not envy our Prime Minister's awesome responsibility of stewarding us through this very difficult time, I do not envy Premier Moe's responsibility of needing to be an effective advocate for this province and its people in front of the power brokers in Ottawa, ensuring that Saskatchewan and her bounty of crops, oil, gas, potash, and uranium are not sacrificed at the altar of trade tariff negotiations or used as a bargaining chip in either Beijing or Washington will require laser focus and a deft touch. But if anyone can do it, Scott Moe and his team can. To the Premier, I say your leadership on the constitutional challenge against the federal carbon tax, as well as your work to form the New West Partnership against federal resource and pipeline regulations, should give everyone in this room, and indeed every Canadian, comfort to know that if there is a path to successfully lifting the tariffs on the economy and on the products of Saskatchewan, that path will be charted by Scott Moe and the Sask Party. Premier Moe likes to talk about the three F's, food, fuel, and fertilizer, and I would humbly like to submit a fourth F, the future. Saskatchewan is ideally suited to position itself as one of the, if not the, single most important player in the AI data center race. They say there is no such thing as a free lunch, but Saskatchewan's climate advantage, which hit me in the face when I got off the plane yesterday, would enable the extensive use of free cooling, which could significantly reduce any data center energy overhead and operational costs. And for context, the energy costs for an AI data center are anywhere between 40 and 60% of total spending. That's the free lunch. Saskatchewan already has established industrial and commercial corridors with pre-existing power, infrastructure, electrical grids, schools, roads, community centers, all within a stone's throw of hundreds of thousands of virgin acres of territory just waiting to be developed. And once established, the heat that comes off of those data centers could be recovered and repurposed. As a matter of fact, it's already happening with the case of the AI health town, which is being developed in Moose Jaw. The massive capital investments, as well as the construction jobs, the attraction of global talent, the expertise, the infrastructure improvements, the knock-on benefits for local communities and local economies, the significant tax revenue could very well be the key to long-term regional economic growth in remote areas of the province that may have thought that their best days were behind them. And so, friends, our challenges are great, and to meet this pivotal moment, this entire country needs more Saskatchewan. And the ethos of this place is embodied by a couple I met just over 12 years ago. I had been working as a national ambassador for UNICEF, and I was on a mission to Malawi, culminating in a bucket list experience of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. We were a team of a dozen or so Canadians, two of whom were a couple from Saskatchewan. The ascent took 2.5 days. And prior to the climb, we were instructed to bring altitude sickness medication with us, just in case, because the thinning air can lead to all sorts of nasty side effects. However, they do warn you that you may or may not be affected by the altitude. Also, they say that if you take the pills, they may or may not help. So this was solid advice. In my case, I most certainly was affected by the altitude. I took the pills, and they did not help. Our ascent to the summit began at midnight, timed perfectly so that we could be at the top of Africa to witness the dawn of a new day. But the gods did not make it easy on us. The temperature dropped like a stone, the wind picked up, and not only was I dealing with hallucinations and a loss of equilibrium, but I also had a persistent eye injury that had been exacerbated by the dry weather and the thinning air, which meant I had lost both peripheral vision and any meaningful depth perception. I was certain I was going to die. And when we got to the summit, any real hopes of enjoying the sunrise were dashed by near whiteout conditions. Add to the fact that it was so cold, none of us could even take off our goggles or scarves so that when we took a picture up there, we could prove to our families we had been to the top of Kilimanjaro. My mind was governed by two thoughts. One, don't go into the light. And two, I want to get off of this mountain right now. But then something really funny happened. The sun did come out. And yes, eventually the actual sun that heats our world graced us with its presence. But I'm not talking about that sun. I'm talking about the glimmer of sunshine that came from our friends from Saskatchewan, who upon summiting Kilimanjaro, they did not get sick. They did not lose their balance. They got up there and they started taking off their hats and their goggles and their balaclavas and their gloves and their scarves to eventually reveal his and hers matching Saskatchewan Rough Rider jerseys. And they proceeded to take pictures as if it was spring break Daytona Beach 1997. Smiling, having snowball fights. It was impossible, despite how terrible I was feeling, not to enjoy being up there with them. So in large part due to the wisdom and leadership of Premier Mo, the optimism that I feel in this room with you today about the prospect of a successful Canadian reinvention are like how most of you feel about the prospects of the Rough Riders besting the BC Lions later today. We're going to take care of business, but we got to be willing to do more, be faster, be stronger, be smarter than anyone else on the field. But when we get there, I hope that we'll be smart enough to appreciate the journey, appreciate the sacrifice, and take stock of that sacrifice. And I hope that we thank each other for the trust and faith that we put in one another to take us to where we needed to go. And when that time ultimately comes, I hope that we as a nation will celebrate like that couple did in green and white, 19,341 feet in the sky, beaming with joy, bursting with pride, standing ready at a height never before achieved, ready to face the challenges of a new day. I thank you for your time, and may God bless you. Thanks so much for watching the show. Now, if you enjoyed what you saw, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of The Ben Mulroney Show.